Hello, Juliet.
Hi, Dennis. Hello, everyone.
Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this class. So we're pre-recording this on Friday night because of load shedding around the South African country. And so Juliet, thank you. I appreciate you doing this at night. The good news is if you need to catch up or follow or anything tomorrow when this class airs, you can just hit your space bar or the pause button on your device and you can catch up. So it actually makes it a lot easier for you following at home. Juliet, thank you so much. They're two really beautiful layouts. I'm not going to keep you because I know you have got load shedding later on tonight. So we're really looking forward to this class.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. And thanks again for such an amazing collection. The Blessed Life collection, it is beautiful. I'm sure those of you who've got your packs in front of you, the beautiful, bold, vibrant colors, it is just gorgeous. So yeah, I'm excited to show you what I've done with it. And we've got two very uncomplicated layouts today. They look like they've got lots of detail on, but they're actually quite easy to put together. So we can get cracking when you're all ready. Okay, right, so this is the collection that we're working with. It is called Blessed Life, and these are the contents of the bulk pack. I'm going to go through the papers, and what we're going to do, those of you who've done my previous classes, we are doing two double layouts. I'm going to show you the two layouts, and we are going to cut for both layouts at the same time. So this is the first layout that we're doing. It has this gorgeous square wreath in the middle and lovely bold. I love the blacks, the bold colors of this collection. That's the first layout we're going to be doing. And the second one, I'll just move that out of frame. The second one is this, and I've used a lot of the softer tones in this double layout. So we are going to cut both sets of layouts papers first. We're going to have them all ready, and then we're going to do one layout at a time. All right. So I'm going to take you through the paper pack and show you the pages that we're going to be using. For now, you can just put your chipboards and your embellishment pack, your acetate sheet, you can put those aside, and we're going to work on those a little bit later. Right, so this is our collection pack of Blessed Life, and the first thing we're going to do is just show you, those who haven't done your fussy cutting yet, I'm going to show you the sheets that we will be using for fussy cutting, so you can take those out of your pack, set them aside, and as the class is pre-recorded, you can get all of those cut first, and it will make it go much quicker if your fussy cut bits have been done. So on the back of the cover sheet, we have this gorgeous page. We're going to cut most of these elements. I have not used this bird and that bird element. So if you don't want to cut all of them, you can leave that out. But I always like to just cut everything and use the extras in cards or on another layout or on any other little bits that you might want to decorate. So that's our cover sheet. We're going to fussy cut that. And then we've got sheet number, just give you the page numbers. We've got this sheet. It is number 8. It's called Privileged, and we're going to cut some of these elements at the back. I've used most of the circles. I've used a couple of the tickets, some tags, and some of those. You are welcome to choose whichever of those words you like to use. I've used, I think, 3 or 4 of them, but you can choose the ones that suit you. So that's our second sheet that we're going to cut. Then we've got this sheet over here. It's number 10. It's called Fortunate. And we are going to cut one of these borders. We don't need the other one on these layouts, but again, you can cut them and use them at your leisure. So we're going to cut one of those borders, and then we're going to cut, I just need 1 or 2 of those little circles, and then we're going to cut basically all the doilies and the floral collages and the birds from the middle. So we're going to cut that sheet. And then the last sheet for fussy cutting is this one, number 11. It's called Blessed. And of course, we're going to cut this beautiful frame in the middle. And I've also used a handful, 6 or 7 of these word strips. You can choose whichever words you would like to use on the layouts, and you can cut those and add them when we do that a little bit later. Okay, So these are the 4 sheets that we're using for fussy cutting. We will only need on one of them, I think it is this one. Just check which one it is. I think it's this one. We're going to need the border strip. So on this sheet, you're going to cut on number 11. You're going to cut that border strip. We are going to use that on one of the layouts. The other border strips we're not going to use on these layouts. So 1 border strip and 4 sheets for fussy cutting. Okay, so let's get to the cutting of the rest of the pages. And I'm going to go page by page in number order and show you the sheets that we're going to use. I like to use a guillotine, so it's just nice, easy, precise cuts. And we are going to start with sheet number 1. It is called 7801. It's called Overjoyed. And as I said, we're going to cut both layouts papers all at once so that we don't lose track of what the pages are called. And I'm just going to call them layout number 1 and layout number 2. We're going to put 1 set on the left and 1 set on the right. Okay, so for layout number 1, let's call it layout number 2. This sheet called Overjoyed. We are going to cut from this left side. We are going to cut a piece 18 by 30.5. So we're going to keep the height of the paper and we're just going to cut in the width. So I always cut my border strips off first. Right, so we're going to cut this 18 centimeters. And we're going to keep the height the same. Right, so that's our cutting size. And this is for layout number 2. So I'm going to put it on the right-hand side. Right, then we're going to use the second sheet of 7801, also Overjoyed. And we're going to also cut off our border strip. With a squeaky guillotine here. Okay, now this side, we're going to use the back side of it. So you need to have this bird collage on the right-hand side. And we are going to cut this 24 centimeters wide. And again, we're going to keep the height to 30.5. We're going to turn it around and cut at 24 centimeters. So that's our size for that. These measurements I'm giving you are all width by height. So 24 by 30.5. That is also for the second layout. So I'm going to put that on the right-hand side. Okay, all the offcuts from this you can put away because we're not going to use anymore. Right, then we've got sheet number 2. 7802, it's called Jubilant. I just love these black distressed borders. And for this particular one, we're going to use both sheets, one on the reverse side. And this is actually going to form the background for our layout number 1. So all we're going to do here is cut off both border strips and we're going to use the pages as is. See, cut a little short. Right, so that is our background for our 1 layout. Both of these pages are going to go to the left because they are for layout number 1. Okay, our next sheet is number 3. It's got this gorgeous floral collage. It's called Exultant. And on the back, it's got your ledger grid pattern. So from the floral side, we're going to cut a piece. First, I'm going to cut off my border strip. Even if we don't use the border strips, I love to save these and you can use them on cards or in any other projects. Right, so we're going to cut a piece that is 12.5 centimeters. We're going to keep the height to 30.5 12.5. And that's the size of that piece, 12.5 by 30.5. And that is for layout number 2. So it's going to go to the right. Okay, now from this piece, we're going to cut 2 small squares. These are both going to be used for frames on our layout, and we're going to cut them 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters. So we're going to have 2. I'm going to go 8 centimeters from the top, and then I'm going to cut from this. I'm going to cut 2 squares of 8 centimeters each. So those are our 2 pieces, 8 by 8. And there are 2 of them. Both of these are going to be for layout number 2. I'm going to put them to the right. Okay, then the next sheet we're going to use, it's my favorite, always a wood grain. I love wood grain paper. This one is number 4, and it's called Elated. And on the back, it's got this hessian or sort of linen texture paper. And from this, we are going to cut. Let's do our border strip first. Okay, now we've got quite a few pieces to cut from this. We get for both layouts. So let's do one at a time. Right, we're going to cut 10.5 by 15.5 from this. And we're using the wood grain side. Right, so that's our first piece. 10.5 centimeters, the width, by 15.5 centimeters, the height. And this is for layout number 1, so it's going to go to the left side. And we're going to use the offcut. And I'm now going to cut another piece that is 10.5 by 10.5 squared. So that piece was already 10.5. Here we go. Yeah, so that's our size, 10.5 by 10.5. It doesn't really matter which way your wood grain goes. I just like to keep the same orientation on each layout. So if you want to do them that way, you know, the other one you would have cut the other way, but it really doesn't matter which way you put it because it's just for a photo mat. Your photo is going to go over it anyway. Okay, so that's 10.5 by 10.5. That's also for layout number 1. Right, so now we're going to cut some more wood grain, also from the wood grain side. We're going to cut for our second layout. We're going to cut a piece 10.5 by 15.5, and we're going to cut 2 of them. So I'm going to turn it, for this case, I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to cut 2 pieces, 10.5 by 15.5. So I'm going to go to 21. And then cut 15.5 and go back and do my 10.5. In this particular case, I've let my wood grain go this way, and that's our size for those 2 pieces, 10.5 centimeters wide, 15.5 centimeters high, and there are 2 of those pieces. Both of these pieces are for our second layout, so I'm going to put them on the right-hand side. Right, then we've got another piece. Let's see if this is big enough. Okay, we're going to use our second sheet for this. And I'm going to cut off my border strip. Right, so now we need a piece, also 10.5 by 10.5. also from the wood grain side. So let's do it like this. 10.5. 10.5, another square piece. And this one is also going to be for our second layout on the right hand side. Okay, now we need 3 pieces from this for some frame mats. They're going to be 7.5 by 7.5. Some of them we're going to use the linen side, some we're going to use this. So it doesn't really matter. We can just cut them all the same, and then we will decide which way we're going to use them afterwards. So 3 pieces, 7.5 by 7.5. There I've got 2. That's my last one from here. Right, so those are the 3 pieces, 3 squares, 7.5 by 7.5. Okay, now I want you to keep the leftovers handy, because we're going to go back afterwards and we are still going to cut something from this. So just keep it to one side. We'll go back to this paper a little later. These 3 are all for the second layout, the right hand side. There we've got this sheet number 5. It's called Gleeful. It's got this gorgeous newsprint on the one side and this beautiful black wash on the other side. We're going to use the black wash side and just cut some photo mats. And these are both going to be for the first layout. So we're going to cut do the border strip. Right, so I need one mat that's 11 by 16 and I need one that's 11 by 11. So I'm going to cut this to 11. And I'm going to cut it 16. That's our first photo mat. 11 centimeters by 16 centimeters. This is for layout number 1. So it's going to the left. And with the offcut piece, I'm going to cut 11 by 11. That's the size for our second photo mat. And that's also for the first layout. So I'm putting it on the left-hand side. Right, that's all we need from this sheet. We're not going to use the second sheet now, so you can just put that aside. And the next sheet is this 7806. It's called Delighted. Gorgeous plaid on the one side. And oh, there's colors on this. I love a dot. Beautiful peachy orange dot. And we are going to cut off our border strip. I always find it easier to just cut off all my border strips because I never know which side of the page I'm going to use from, but you can also just cut from the top or the left if you want to, and you want to keep your border strips on so that you can find the names of the papers later. Right, so we're going to cut a strip of the dots paper. We cut it 7 centimeters wide. And we're going to keep the height to 30.5. That is our size. For this piece, 7 by 30.5, and it's for our second layout, so it's going on the right-hand side. Right, so now we're going to cut another 2 small strips from here, 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters. They're also going to be for frames. So I need 2 of them. Okay, so that's my size, 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters. There are 2 of them. And a little bit later, we're going to turn those into frames. So both of these are for the second layout. I'm putting them on the right-hand side. Right, now our second sheet, keep this aside. We are going to use this. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So just put it to one side for now, and we're going to cut some envelopes from here, but we're going to do that at the end. So you can put that aside. Right, these beautiful quote sheets. This is number 7. It's called Wonderful. And we are going to cut 2 blocks from here. Let's cut off our border strip. Right, so for our first layout, we're going to use this block that says Memories are Timeless Treasures of the Heart. And we're going to use those 2 small blocks as photo mats. So for layout number 1, these are the 3 pieces we're going to cut from here. Don't need to measure them because they are already the size that we're going to use. Okay, so I'm going to have those 2. They are 10 by 7.5, but as I say, the blocks are already that size on the paper, so you don't need to measure them. These are for layout number 1. If you prefer to use a different quote on this layout, you're welcome to. You can use This Is Our Story, or you can use that one. I have not used them on the other layout. I've chosen this one because I love the boldness of the black, but you are welcome to choose a different quote. Okay, so that's the other piece we need. It is 10 by 15, and that's also for layout number 1. And these 3 extras you can use on cards, tags, other projects. Right, then number 8 we already used in the fussy cut sheet. So we don't need to do any more cutting with that. Number 9 is our striped sheet. It's this one called Lucky. And we're going to cut 3 small strips of stripes. I like my stripes to run horizontally so that I can see as much of the stripe as possible. If you cut it that way, you just get sort of one long pattern. So that's the way I like to cut it. And I'm going to cut 3 strips that are roughly 1.5 centimeters each. Okay, so I'm going to work backwards from here. I'm going to cut at 29. I'm going to leave the length or the height of them to 30.5. So cut 1, cut again at 27.5, 2, and I'm going to cut on 26. Right, so I have 3 strips that look like that, and these are the size of the 3 strips: 1.5 centimeters wide, 30.5 centimeters height. Okay, these 3 strips are all for our second layout, so they're going to go to the right. Okay, this particular sheet, we're also going to use the border strip that I cut off. This one that says, "Life is what we make it, always has been, always will be." I'm just going to trim it a little bit because it's still showing some of the paper. Right, so that border strip I'm going to keep with that as well. And then we don't need any more of that striped paper. Right, so the other sheets we have already allocated with the fussy cutting. So for now, you can put your guillotines away, and I want to just show you what we're going to do with the other piece. For those of you that have downloaded the notes, there was a envelope template that looks like this that was included with the notes. So if you haven't already printed this, you will need to do that. And going to cut out these 2 envelopes and use them to trace on our paper. We're going to use sheet number 6, and we're going to cut 4 envelopes. We're going to cut 2 of each from this sheet of paper. So once you've cut your envelopes, they're going to look like that. And I'm just going to use a pencil to draw them off. It doesn't really matter which side you draw them on. We're going to use 2 of them. We're going to use on the check side, and 2 of them we're going to use on the dot side. So you can just draw them off on whichever side works for you. The pencil line is easy to just rub off afterwards. Okay. And then you're going to cut out these envelopes, even if they're not perfect. Just add a little bit of ink or a little bit of sanding on the edges, and it will hide any little bits that aren't cut well. Okay, 2 like this. The dotted lines on the templates are just a guide as to where you're going to fold them once you've cut them out. Okay, so I've got 2 of those. I'm going to do 2 of these. Make them slightly different sizes. The one is a bit of a square envelope, and the other one is more rectangular. See? You, of course, if you have fancy die cut machines, you can make envelope templates on your Silhouette or your Cricut or your Brother, and you can put your paper through the machine and cut them out. This is the good old-fashioned way. Or if you also have a fancy We Are Memory Keepers envelope punch board, like this, one of these punch boards, you can also select an envelope size that more or less matches these, and you can cut them out on the punch board. But we're doing it the old-fashioned way for now. All right, so I'm just going to take a little bit of time now and cut these off. Get roughly around each of them first. I love using envelopes and pockets and things like that on a layout. They don't always have to be functional, so you don't even have to open the envelope. Sometimes I just like to stick them closed. It just looks like something a little more interesting than a photo method. But you can use them to tuck more photos in, a little bit of journaling, some hidden notes, little bits of memorabilia, anything like that is what you can use these envelopes for. Okay, so we're just cutting along the lines that we have drawn around the templates. Okay, so that one is going to be one of the envelopes. I think this one is one of the straight ones. Let's cut the 2 curved ones first. As I said, really doesn't have to be perfect straight lines. Once it folds up, you won't even see if there's a few little nicks or a few little skew lines. As long as your corners line up, then you should be fine. Okay, so we've got 2 like that. And then 2 of the straighter ones. I don't know if you can see the lines on the camera that I've drawn, but it's easier to do it in pencil because you can just rub them out if you see any little bits afterwards. Right, that's a rectangular envelope. And this is my last one. Okay. So now if you have, it's best to have a bone folder. Or a burnishing tool. I've got a bone folder. This is a scoring tool or a burnishing tool. Any one of these. Even if you don't, you can just use your ruler. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one of each of these. You see, we've got two the same and two the same here. So one of these we're going to have that way, and the other one we're going to have that way. And the same with this. We're going to do one on the dot side and one on the gingham side. Okay, so all that's left to do now is to fold up our corners. If you look at the template, you will see that we need to fold along those dotted lines. And the same for this one. All right, so basically it's from corner to corner. You can use a ruler. And you can just use a ball tool or a little thing just to make a little bit of a scoring mark. It will help you to fold it up. You can also do it on your trimmers. If you have a normal trimmer, not a guillotine, you will be able to score along the fold, along the track where your blade normally goes. If you have a scoring blade in your trimmer, you can use it like that as well. So just scoring it is just going to help us fold up the edges a little bit. See, now it folds quite easily. And then you can use your bone folder or a burnishing tool just to flatten those corners, flatten the fold, should I say. Okay, and you can see we've created a quick and easy little envelope there. So I'm going to do the same with the three of these now. I'm going to fold them all up. I'm going to use the sides that I've laid them out so that I have one of each. You really can just score on your cutting mat as well. You just need a little bit of a line to help you fold because the paper is quite thick. Yeah, I've got two like that, and these are my last two. Okay, number one, and the last one. Just remember that if I'm going too fast, you can pause your video and you can get these done. We're obviously racing the clock just in case we have good old South African load shedding. So I am doing this as quick as possible so that we can get through as much as we can in case we lose power. Right, so that's the last envelope folded up. Right, so that's our 4 envelopes. The prep is done. So what we're going to do now is you can, if you want to ink them, you can use a little bit of ink to define your edges. You know me, I like to use a bit of a sanding block and I like to sand the edges. And then we'll put a little bit of tape here and there and fold it up. You can always keep one part of the envelope open if you want to cut something in. And I've just put little stickers or little circles on the top, but you can use twine to close them. You can use a little Velcro dot. You can put a magnet on, anything that works for you if you want to keep the closures functional, open and closed. Right, so before I do all of that sanding, I want to do the last little bit of prep that we need to do for our second layout, that we just have that cutting out of the way. Even though these are actually for layout number 1, I want us to take these frames that we have cut for number 2. Right, see, I've cut 2 of these, but I actually only need 1. Okay, so with these 3, we are going to cut, I'll show you on the layout. We're going to cut frames around them. Now, I do use a frame punch board. I think I've shown you this in a previous video, which I'm going to use now, just for ease of time. But if you don't have a frame punch board, the easiest way to do it, instead of measuring all of them, take one little offcut piece of paper, measure it, and use that as a template, or once you've made one, use that as a template to draw your lines around the other 2. And then you take your craft knife or your scissors and you cut out the center. Okay, so I'm just going to show you with a punch board. I like to use a 1/2 inch frame. So it works out to roughly 1.2 centimeters. You can cut your frames 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters. If you like a little bit thinner or thicker, it doesn't really matter. So I've already set my templates here to 1/2 inch. And the way this punch board works is it just creates the little corners. You punch them on each side. Now over here, there's a little blade, and you use that as a trimmer to cut there and there. For small frames like this, I always just find it easier just to take my scissors and just cut between them. So you really don't need to use the trimmer part, but that is what it's for. And there we have a frame. So once you've done one, even if you had to draw it, you can use this as a template for the others. All right. The last one I'm doing on the floral side. This one. Okay. It also leaves these really cute little corners. So you can use these as photo corners on your layout as well, if you're lucky enough to have one of these. Right. So these are my 3 frames that are done. And we are going to put them aside with layout number 2. All right, so that's all our cutting, all our prep, all sorted. And I'm going to put all of the pieces that we've cut for layout number 2, I'm going to put that all aside. And we are going to start with layout number 1 with assembling it. Okay, so we will need our envelopes. Okay, so here's all my pieces. This layout is going to be super simple to put together. And it looks really effective, but it's actually really, really simple. Okay, so just to remind you, this is the layout that we are preparing. You can see I've used that on the background. And here are our envelopes. The only thing we still have to do is to cut these mattings for the envelopes. But because sometimes we fold a little skew or our one side becomes longer than the other, I wanted to make up the envelopes first. And once I've put them together, I'm going to just mount them on a piece of that paper and cut a small frame around them for the matting. So I didn't give the specific sizes on the instructions. I've just said they just cut 4 mattings for the 4 envelopes. Right, so let's put that on the side. And this is our background that we're going to work with. Okay, now, again, you know me, I love my sanding block, and I am going to proceed to sand the edges of my papers. For those of you who like to ink, you can ink your pieces now. You don't have to do the sanding. But basically, all of these pieces that we've cut, I'm going to sand the edges of all of these. You can also sand around the edges of your background, but you can also do that after the whole layout is assembled. So it's not necessary to do that right now. Okay. So I'm going to use a small cutting mat to do my sanding. I think I've shown you in previous classes, but for those who are doing this for the first time, the easiest way to sand, I'm going to show you with the black because you will see it much easier, is to put your paper right on the edge of your cutting mat. You can just slide it off the edge of your table or whatever surface you're working on, but I'm going to demo it like this so that you can see, and to just sand like that. It keeps your page nice and flat, and it doesn't bend your page, because if you're doing it like this in the air, it's sometimes a little tricky with bigger pieces. So I like to do mine on the edge of a mat, and it's really just quick and easy. Okay, so I'm going to get this done. It might go a little bit out of frame while I'm busy sanding, but go ahead and sand all of these pieces that we have set out for use on this. You don't need to sand this piece, because a lot of it, if you have a look here, is going to be behind that frame. So it's not necessary to sand this. I have actually cut this off a little bit here, just next to the word. So we're going to take off roughly 1 centimeter. So you can actually just take your trimmers and trim that off. It's not an exact measurement. It's just a little bit off the edge. Okay, more or less like that. Yeah, so you can go ahead and sand all of these pieces. You're going to hear some nice sanding noises in the background. If I get all of these pieces prepped, look at that beautiful white edge that the sanding creates. It really just, you might not see it so well with the lighting, but especially on the black, you can see how the sanding is just so effective. If you don't want to sand, you can leave your papers as is. It's optional. Or if you prefer to use any of your inks to edge, you can do that as well. And I'm going to do the same for my little envelopes. Also going to give them a little sand. Ah, so I've sanded those. Okay, let me show you what I'm going to do with the envelopes. This you can actually just do a little bit in the air like this. Just want to go around the edges of the piece that we've cut, because that's the part that we're going to see. Okay, so you'll see if I fold this up, how you can just see that little bit of a border all around it. It just gives a little bit of definition. You can also go a little bit around here if you like. I don't like to do too much on these edges. I don't want to mess up my corners. Okay, so we're going to do that to our 4 envelopes. Celebr8 papers are so nice and thick that the sanding really is very effective on it. It doesn't crinkle the pages. If you work with quite thin paper, then sometimes the sanding is a little bit tricky, but we've got lovely, I think it's a 250 gram board. So the sanding really keeps the paper nice and firm still. Right. Okay, so that's all my sanding out the way for now. And I'm going to show you now how we're just going to tape together these little envelopes so that they are ready. Ideally, you need a thin tape. You can also use a liquid glue, although you're going to have to hold them together for a little bit to keep them sealed while it's busy drying. So I like to just use a little bit of tape. I just use thin double-sided tape, and we are going to just place a little bit of tape there and there. I'm not going to stick that down because I like to, maybe put something inside the envelopes. So we're just going to leave that until we decorate it with all the little bits that we're going to use on our envelope. So we're going to do that to our 4 envelopes. Then this envelope, the part with the flat side is at the bottom. So the tape's going over here and there. Move this out. Okay. So it looks like, and our last one. Right. So there you have your 4 envelopes. Aren't they super cute? Okay, so now before we're going to get to sticking on our layout, we're going to quickly cut our mattings for these 4 envelopes. So the easiest way for me to do that is not to measure them, because sometimes I do go a little bit skew when I fold them up. So I'm actually going to just put tape on the back of all of them, and I'm going to stick them to the paper that I want to use as a matting, and then cut it out from there. I'm taping the back of all 4 of these envelopes. I'm a tape girl. I do use liquid glue sometimes, but generally not on paper. I use my Tombow for little embellishments, little bits and pieces, but for all the mattings and the plain paper pieces, I like to have them nice and flat, so I like to use tape. Right. We're going to use, remember these leftovers that we had? We're going to use the linen side. So stick our envelopes to them with just a little bit of a border. Plenty paper, so we can just put them in the corners. Okay, so that's the way I'm doing it, and then I'm just going to either use my scissors or my guillotine, just cut around them. See how skew some of the envelopes are, but it will just get hidden on the layout. Right, if there's any little skew bits, I'm going to use the scissors to trim them. And I'm also going to just sand around the edges a little. That's also going to disguise any little skew edges that I might have. Right, that's all ready. Those of you know me know that I like to work with a nice clean workspace. So I just use these little alcohol wipes, just clean the dust off of my mat before I start sticking down. Okay, so let's bring our background in. We have our background pages. This is what we are working with. Okay, we're going to need our guillotine one more time. We have this beautiful fussy cut frame. And I've just seen here's a tiny little piece at the top that I forgot to cut. So let me just fix that quickly. Right, so we've got our fussy cut frame, which we're going to put in the middle, but instead of having to cut a photo, we're going to put a quote here and our 2 small photo mats there. So there's no photo that you have to cut in half. It's really just this part that we're cutting. You don't need to measure. I've just cut it basically between, just next to those little popping up flowers there. And I'm going to pop it into my guillotine. And I'm just going to make sure that this line lines up more or less in line with one of the grid marks on my guillotine. Then I'll know that my frame is straight. Okay. And as I do like to do with these frames, I like to raise these with foam tape, as you can see here, so that it stands up nicely. I have raised it with some foam. Okay, so we're going to prep that. We're going to prep these. We can tape both of these small mats. We are going to tape. These are double mats for our two photos. So we're going to stick the wood grain to the black for both of those. We're going to apply tape to this, and we're going to apply tape to that. We're also going to apply tape to the back of all of our frames, the envelopes, and then we are prepped everything to stick down. If you find it quicker to use glue, please go ahead and do that. I'm just a double-sided tape girl. Okay. I'm going to start with just double matching these pieces. Put all of them on the side. Okay, so we've got everything prepped. We've got tape on the back, all of that. I'm going to put double-sided tape, foam tape, on the back of this. I'm just going to add a few pieces here and there just to bulk it up. I don't want any of it collapsing. All right, I think that's enough. So we've got our background. We've literally got all our pieces prepped. But now I want us just to get our chipboards done, because we are going to use these grid chipboards. They're going to be tucked slightly underneath. So before we stick that frame down, I want to get those chipboards prepped and ready. So you can put all these pieces of paper aside. And I want you to take out your, we're going to use this chipboard pack as well as this chipboard pack. Now, I don't want you to use the backings of these for ink, because we are going to use these on our second layout. So we can just take these both out of the packaging. We can use our plastic to ink on. Save these two pieces. We're going to use them in layout number 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this is we are also going to use these 2 frames on the second layout. So for now, we are just going to cut these pieces loose, the pieces that we need. We need this word together. We need this word treasured moments. And we are going to use those little hearts and that heart. Okay, so we're just going to cut that loose from the frame. Okay, we can put that aside for the second layout. These are the pieces we're going to use now. And now I'm going to keep those little hearts together. It's just going to be easier to ink them. And the piece that we need here, we're going to use those 2 big corners, and we're going to use that whole grid in the center. Once again, just keep the frame nice and neat, because we're going to use the frame, this whole frame, on the second layout. Okay, that we can put aside for our second layout. This is the piece that we're going to use now, along with these pieces. These are the inks that I'm using. I have my constant cloud white. Love, love, love my white ink. And I have a black ink. You can use any black ink that you have. And this one is called Pink Grapefruit. And it just brings out this beautiful coloring in some of the pages. So all of these pieces, all I'm going to do is just give them a little layer of white. All it's going to do is just take a little bit of that laser burn out. I'm going to do both of these words in black, and just the hearts I'm going to do in the pink grapefruit. So I'm going to use my packaging as a background. And just add a little bit of white, just to lighten these up a little bit. Super simple inking on this layout. Solid colors, no blending. Okay, I'm going to do both corners. Right, so those 2 are ready. I'm going to do this in black. Like this. Now you can take a small sheet of paper or a little piece of plastic, just block off the heart, because we're going to do this whole word in black. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to do my hearts in this gorgeous color. As well as my other hearts. Okay, and that's all our inking done. Goes away. My trusty little alcohol wipes just to clean my hands. And okay, this piece, we are going to cut this in half vertically from top to bottom. You can take a ruler, you can use a craft knife, you can use the scissors. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to basically just cut it next to that line over there, because we're going to use half on the one side and half on the other side. Okay, so we split that in two. Right, that's all our prep done, and let's go back and put our layout together. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is get the positioning right for the center of my frame, and I'm not going to stick it down yet. I'm just placing it there because it's going to help us place the other elements around the layout. Okay, I'm going to glue. I'm going to glue my corners down. I'm going to do this little one in the top right-hand corner. Oh, sorry, the top left-hand corner. Okay, and I'm going to do exactly the same with the bottom corner here, with this small piece. Right, so we've done that. Okay, now we're going to take our photo mats. We're going to get those ready, and we're going to get our envelopes ready. Yeah, I'm going to start with the square envelope, the top here. And I'm going to use this as a guide, more or less where to put it. I'm just putting it in that little corner. And I'm going to use one of the gingham straight envelopes next to it, the rectangle one. Right, and I'm going to place this one just below it like that. Okay, Then I'm going to use this photo mat. I'm going to put this over here. You really don't need to measure exactly where it goes. I just eyeball it. Okay, so we've got 2 envelopes. We've got our photo mat. We're going to do our large photo mat on this side. Right, and we're going to put this on this page. Okay, if you want to know the measurement, it's roughly about 5.5 centimeters from the right and about 2 centimeters from the top. Okay, so we put that one down, and now I'm going to do my 2 envelopes here at the bottom. Again, I've got my frame in place just to plan more or less where the envelopes are going to go. So I do want them slightly tucked in. Just realized I have this frame. I've actually cut this frame the wrong way. On the layout, I did it that way, but it doesn't matter. The frame works both ways. Right, so we're going to put our envelope here. Okay. And I'm going to put the second envelope here. Okay, so we've got the bases done. Right, now, if you see what how I said, my apologies, I have cut this frame wrong, but all we're going to do is just swap the layout around. If you have a look here, you'll see that that part is on the bottom right, and on this one, I've cut it on the bottom left. So what we're going to do is we're going to move these 2 photo mats here, and we're going to put our quote on this side. I'll just trim it on that side. So we're just going to swap it around. Same layout, same difference. Just with a slight change. Let's just trim that a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to stick this one down while just keeping this in place, more or less, so that I can see where it's positioned. I'm going to stick this down like that. Okay. Now I can take this photo mat, this big frame, and I'm going to just remove the tape at the top so that I can position it in place. Okay, and now I'm going to put these 2 down. Right, and I can stick the rest of my frame down. I'm only just going to do the top part, just so I can line it up. Okay, so before we stick it down completely, we're tucking that chipboard under there, and we're tucking tucking this one under the left-hand side. So I'm going to use my glue. Just add a little bit of like that. This one under that side. Right, so now that I've put those down, I can stick the rest of the frame down. So you can remove all of this foam tape. Yeah, and we can do the same on this side. Right, so our base layout is done, and all that's left now is finishing touches. So we've got a few more Fussy cut bits. I'm also going to use parts of my acetate sheet. I'm going to add this to that corner. Balance out with that one. I'm going to add these beautiful little birds. So now it's really just about placing any little elements where you like them. I'm adding my bird over here. And one of these circle quotes. Raising that with foam tape, and I'm going to add that over there. I'm using one of these little words, adding a bit of foam tape, and that's going to stick down my envelope. Right. And tuck a leaf underneath it. Okay. On this side, I'm adding this side. I'm again going to put foam tape on this little circle quote. Every moment matters. And I'm going to use that to stick down my envelope closure. Again, if you don't want your envelopes to close, if you want them to open and close, then all you need to do is just not remove the foam tape at the bottom, and you can keep it open and closing. You can use the envelope to tuck things inside. Right, so I'm adding a little bird here. And I'm going to use my chipboard titles. I'm going to use the together word at the bottom of this big frame. I'm going to add that there. Just to bring all the little black elements together. Okay, I've got this little word that says love you. Adding this to the bottom. Right, so I've got my little word strips and I'm just going to place those, a few over here, a few on this side. But there, bottom left and top right, I've got tickets that I'm going to tuck underneath like that and just add some flower detail. So let's stick those down. Now for these little bits, I like to use liquid glue because when they're still wet, I can move things around and I don't have to worry about placing everything perfectly until I'm happy with where it is. Okay, I'm happy with that, and I'm going to do the same at the bottom here. Okay, now I'm going to take my acetate sheet. I'm going to use a little bit of these acetate items. Once again, we're going to keep our background sheet that we can use on our other layout. So we're going to put that aside. And I'm going to use one or two of these little tabs and that border that I'm just going to add to some detail here. So just cut out around the printed text on the acetate sheet. I'm also going to use this quote, this little one in inverted commas here. Right. I'm going to put the quote there. I'm going to cut these. I like to cut around the shapes. It just gives it a little bit more definition. Okay, I'm going to cut this in half. Right, so for those of you that struggle with sticking down acetate, the best adhesive I find to use is one of these Zig two-way glues. I just think they work really well. You just dot your glue on the back. Just do little dots like that behind the printed parts, and they stick really, really well. So I'm going to put one there. Obviously, if you're putting a photo down, you'll want to stick your photo down first, and then you'll add these little bits as accent afterwards. Right, so I've got a bit of a opposite balance over there, and I'm going to stick my quote down. Just behind that. I've got these tabs. I'm also going to cut around. Add one to this little envelope here. And we're going to do the other one then. Okay, and the hearts. These two little hearts, I just haven't cut them loose yet. I'm going to add these next to that quote. Okay, and last but not least, our gorgeous dome stickers. I'm going to put a clock in the middle of that flower. I'm going to add this to that little envelope. And yeah, I think that's it. The rest we can keep for the other layout. And then the very last thing that I'm going to add, my other favorite is to add a little touch of glitter, to add a little bit of stickles. If you have a look here, you can see I've added some glitter detail to parts of the flowers. Mostly these sort of pink flowers, I've outlined them with glitter all around the layout. Yeah, so we do that right at the end because the stickles does take a little bit of time to dry. And the one that I'm going to use is called Diamond because it has a little bit of this, this nice warm color in it. And all that I'm going to do is just actually draw with the stickles. I'm going to draw around each flower, just roughly freehand like this. It doesn't even need to be perfect. Just tracing generally the petals. And once it dries, it's just going to give a gorgeous little accent to your layout. I'm going to do that around all the pink flowers. Okay, and I'm going to do that all around the layout. A little bit of continuity. And the last little bit on this side. I say just tracing the petals, just the outline. Okay, and that's it. We are done with our first layout. Okay, are we ready to move on to the next one?
Oh, it's a really beautiful layout. Thank you, Juliet.
Oh, thank you. Actually, quick and easy to put together. We obviously just spent some time doing all the cutting, but and the envelopes, but nice and easy to put together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dana, shall we have like just a 5-minute tea break?
Sure. I'll pause the.
Everyone just grab a cup of tea, myself included, and 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll be back to do the next one.
Awesome.
Okay, we're ready to get started on our second layout. This is the layout that we are doing. We've got quite a lot of pieces that we cut, but we have prepped all of that. So let's get started. Right. So the first thing, I have used 2 sheets of plain cardstock for my background. I just find it easier with all of these little layered bits to lay it onto cardboard. You can use craft, you can use white, you can use any cardboard that you have in your stash, or basically any 12 by 12 sheet of paper. Okay, so I'm using that as the background. And we've got lots of little pieces that we've cut here. So I want us to start by getting all the sanding work out of the way. And I'm going to show you the pieces that we need to sand. We do not need to sand these 2 pieces. They have frames that are going over them, so you won't see the edges. So you can put those 2 pieces aside. They do not need to be sanded. We don't need to sand this piece. The 3 striped strips, we only need to sand one edge. We do not need to sand this either because we're not going to see the edge. So these 2 pieces, we're going to sand just on that one side and just on that one side. Okay, so one side of each of the stripes, the left of this bird and the right of that bird. And this piece we're going to sand all the way around. Okay, then we have cut our 3 frames. We did that earlier on, and I have again just sanded, like I say, or inked if you prefer, around these little frames. Okay, so let's just do that. A sanding block, and we're going to get all of that out of the way. When we're done with all of this, you can all let me know in the comments how much you love or don't love sanding. If I've converted you or not. Do you find it easier to prep all my pieces and get all of the sanding or chalking and that out of the way rather than doing it bit by bit? And you don't have mess everywhere. Okay, so I've just got these 2 edges to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our background assembled. I am going to adhere these two pieces. These are going to go in the center. So I'm going to start by just putting tape on them. Pick those two. I'm going to prep these as well. Put tape on the back of all my striped strips. And the quote strip. Right, and I've also got these two pieces. We didn't need to sand them, but I'm also going to tape them. Tape. Okay, so let's stick our basic background down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the middle with this piece, but I am not going to peel the tape off there because I might want to tuck my stripe strip under. So I'm just peeling off these two pieces, and in the middle of my background sheets, I'm going to stick that sheet down. You can see I can still tuck things underneath there, and I'm going to do exactly the same with this piece. Line the pages up. As you can see, these two will work nicely there in the middle. Okay, so I've left that flapping as well, so I can still add things underneath. Then on the extreme right, I'm going to stick my dot piece. That's going to go right on the edge of this, even just tucking underneath here. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to put the floral paper. Which we can stick down. See? Okay. So I've got a very basic background. Before I stick this down, I'm going to add one of the striped strips. So I'm not peeling the whole, I'm just positioning it in place first. Making sure I'm happy with it, and then see, can peel my tape off and stick that down. And now I'm going to peel the last piece of tape off here and stick that down. So that basic background is done. I love how the little stripe piece just breaks the two patterns. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to add a strip of stripes. To this side, I'm tucking it just underneath here. Okay. Like that. Right, and then the quote is going to go just next to that strip on that side. Right. What I need to do now is stick this piece down. Okay, and that's our basic page background. Really nice and simple. Right, so now we have these two pieces, our mats for over here. We have a photo mat over here, and we have our 3 frames. So we have cut mattings for our frames. I'm going to use one of them is going to be a stripe, a wood grain, and the other one is going to be linen. So we are going to put foam tape behind all 3 of our frames and raise them, and then we're going to stick them onto the mattings. These 3 pieces, we are going to cut mattings from the background sheets of our chipboard and acetate embellishments that we took out earlier on. So you can use the back if you don't want the white to show, and we're going to cut frames just bigger than this. We're going to cut 2 pieces. Let's do that now. Move that out of the way for our guillotine. So we're going to cut 2 pieces that are 11 centimeters by 16. You'll see that's just 1 centimeter bigger than those pieces, so it just gives us a little bit of a mat. 11 by 16, 2 of those. And the last piece that we're going to cut, just to show you those sizes again, 11 wide by 16 centimeters high, and we're going to cut 2 of them. We're cutting this from our packaging sheets. And the last piece that we're going to cut is 11 by 11. That's the square one, and also cut from our packaging sheet. Okay. Right, so we can stick our mattings we can stick our photo mats to their backgrounds like that. Yeah, so we've prepped those 3 pieces, and we are going to stick them onto our layout. Right, we're going to start with the two bigger photos, or photo mats, should I say. And we're going to do them on the right-hand page. Right, so we've got our two photo mats stuck down. The one on the left-hand side, I want you to get your fussy cutting pieces. And I've got this little tag that I'm going to stick under the bottom before I stick it down. So I'm going to prep that. I'm going to put a little bit of glue underneath my tag. Okay, and this piece is going here, but I want to tuck this tag just underneath the bottom a little bit before we stick it down. Okay. Right, so now I'm going to prep my frames. I said we're going to apply foam tape. We're going to put foam tape onto these three frames. I like my frames to be nice, and I like to put lots of foam tape on so that they don't buckle. Yeah, so I'm going to stick the backings to these mats. Very simply, just like that. And the same with these two pieces. Okay. And now all that's left is to stick these. That one's going to go on the left-hand page. And this one just below it. Right, and I've got another little tag here that I'm just going to use a piece of it. And I'm going to stick this frame over here. I'm going to tuck that little piece of a tag just underneath it. Okay. We've got this big fussy cut element here, the two birds together. And I'm going to stick this piece over here. I'm not going to put glue under the top because I want to still be able to stick my photo down. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue along the bottom. Just get this, get that stuck down. And I'm going to let it flap a little bit there. like that. Right, so I haven't put glue there. I can stick that down later on once I've done my photo and all the frames. Then you can add glue to the top there. Right, so now we fussy cut one of these borders. So I'm going to cut off that strip just next to the zigzag, and I'm going to adhere that to the right hand side just to balance out the flowers a little bit. So that zigzag strip, you can take your guillotine and you can, in fact, I can even just use my craft knife and I can just cut that whole piece off. Okay, and I'm going to stick this piece. I'm not going to put glue all over the little bits first because I might want to tuck things underneath, but we're just sticking that to the end of the right hand side page. Okay. Right, so over here, I've got a little bit of a, over here and over here, we're going to do a little bit of a collage of some of our fussy cut items. Let's have a look here, all these pieces that we have. Right, so I'm going to my two circle elements. I'm going to just keep them aside. I'm going to use this half doily. Once again, the background was really simple. So all we're doing now is we're adding the bits of embellishments. And to that, I'm going to add that to my frame. Got this beautiful flower. I'm going to add that to my bottom frame. Like that. Okay, I'm going to use another little half doily, and I'm going to add it on this side, just next to that frame over there. You can let these little bits tuck over it. Okay, I've got another big doily here. I'm going to cut the bottom off. And I'm going to just add a piece of doily over here. And that piece that I cut off, I'm going to use on that side. Yeah. So we're really just taking the doilies and we're putting them randomly across the layout. I want another piece of doily up at the top. I do it like that. And then use one of these fussy cut bits. And add this to the top. Like that. Yeah, and I've just stuck them off the page. And when I'm happy with the placement, I will take my craft knife and just slice them off. So we've got a bit of a collage there at the top. I'm adding a few little bits. And I'm going to add another label to that frame. And just take all the little bits and pieces of fussy cuts and embellishments, and you're going to add them just to fill up some of the little corners and I like to call the quiet spots on the layout. Okay, I'm missing one fussy cut here. I'm just having a look for it quickly. I think it's lying with my papers. Oh, there it is. I see I haven't cut it out yet, so I'm just putting one more little piece for the bottom here. There's so many of these little collages. You can really use any one that you like because there's lots of little bits of layering that we're going to do with different flowers over it. Right, sorry, I missed that one. We've cut him out quickly. And I'm going to add this one over here. And add a few more of the bigger flowers. We're really just taking all these little bits and adding them in. Fill up this corner a little bit. Okay, so I've got these two that I'm going to raise with foam tape. I love doing the circles with foam tape because they just give such a nice shadow on the background. Right, so the biggest circle I'm going to do over here. And the smaller circle, I'm going to pop along the bottom. I'm going to add a little bird. Okay. I've got this big flower. I'm going to just cut a little piece off the top like that. And I'm going to add this to the top of that photo mat. Okay. Right, so we've got a few little bits left, but we just need to do our chipboards, and that will be the last little bits of this layout. We're going to do a chipboard title here, And then our 2 chipboard frames, we're going to add to those photo mats. And then we've got a few finishing touches left and we are basically done. So I'm going to get my chipboards out and just show you how I've inked those. Right, the colors that I've used for this, I've used a color called Sage. And this one is called Spanish Olive. It's just a little bit darker than Sage. And I've again used pink grapefruit. And this color called Red Brick. And once again, I use my white because I'm going to use the white to blend them. Okay. There's one other color that you can also use. It's called Pumpkin Spice. And together, these are going to give us this blended look that we're going to do here. So I'm going to cut the main title from the frame. And we want all these little, the joining bits, we want cut neatly off the frame because we are going to use the frame as one of our photo mats. Okay, so we have that frame. I'm going to neaten this one up. How gorgeous is this title? Right, and then I have this one. I've left those 2 corners on it. Okay, so those are the 2 frames we're going to do. And I'm going to start out again by just inking my frames in white. Just adding a little bit of white to everything. That gives a great background for when you're adding other colors that you can blend them. If you don't add the white, then if you don't do the white first, then the chalk generally absorbs into the chipboard and it won't blend the colors as nicely. So the white is quite an important starting point, just to give you a bit of a surface to work on. Unless you're doing it all in one color, then you generally don't need the white. But when you are working with multiple colors, the white is your base. It's almost like your primer, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to do white with this one too. So my method is always just to use my fingers. If you don't like to get your hands dirty, you can use a little your blending brush or a finger dauber. But I love to just work with my fingers because I just find I'm able to blend the colors easier. So I'm going to start with the frames, and this one I'm going to do in a combination of the greens. A little bit, and I'm going to add the darker green on top. And just blend them a little bit down the side. As simple as that. And I'm going to do this one with, this is pink grapefruit. It's quite a bright color, so we're going to do it first. And I'm going to add the darker color over it. Again, it doesn't have to be everywhere. I'm going to do little touches of this just to bring in a bit of the orange. And I'm going to use this red brick just here and there to go a little bit darker. These ones are quite, you don't need to overthink it. They don't have to be perfect. You can just add as much or as little color as you like. Just so that you've got a little bit of a multicolor effect on the chipboard. Okay, so those are my 2 frames. And then the title, I'm going to keep this on here. And I have worked with the green downwards. So generally I start with the lighter colors. And I'm going to do a bit of the light green in the center here. And I'm going to use my Spanish olive to go around the tops. And just rub it lightly with my fingers to blend those two colors together. And so you can see the dark going into the light. And then I'm going to add, I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to do a little bit of this. And use the red brick, the darker one, along the bottom, just to highlight those dark edges. Okay. And it's as easy as that. If you don't like the colors you've done in the middle, you could take a bit of white. You can just rub them over. But as you see, if you just take your fingers, because you have that white underneath and you just rub it, the colors will blend in together. Right, so those are my chipboards. Very simple. I'm going to clean my mat. You can use a wet wipe just to wipe your mat. I use these little alcohol wipes, but wet wipes work extremely well for just cleaning the chalk. Fortunately, the chalk inks do clean really well. Other stamp pads are going to make a little bit more of a mark on your mat, but chalk inks are quick and easy to clean up. Okay, now we again are going to have an off-cut piece of this that we kept aside in the beginning. And what I'm going to do is cut a matting from this to stick behind our title. Okay, you can just do it freehand. You can stick it down first. I like to just cut a rough circle like that, and then I actually stick it down onto that piece of the wood grain paper. Okay, and then you can take your scissors or your craft knife and just go neatly around it once it's in place. It's a lot easier to cut. Yeah, so we just matted it in a piece of wood grain paper. And I'm going to apply that with foam tape. These two, we're going to just stick. Bring that out back. Yeah, so the frames we're going to stick just like that. If you still want to put a photo that tucks under the frames, then perhaps just put glue on the top or one side or something of the frames. Otherwise, you can always cut your photo a little bit smaller just to fit in between. And that frame should fit right over that piece of wood grain paper so that you still see the frame of the craft board underneath. And I'm going to do the same with this one. Okay, I love how we can use the frames, basically the borders of the chippies as lovely dimensional accents, because they do just give nice dimension and they stand up on the layout. Okay, so this one I'm going to raise with foam tape again. We're going to just give it a bit of a 3D look. And we're going to add that to the left page. Tuck it in over there. Okay, the only little piece that we haven't done yet is we've got our second quote and this stripy strip, which I'm going to add over here. Okay, so we're going to just take that to the end here. See? And I'm going to add the quote underneath it. Just going to stick it over the bottom. Right, and on the end of the page, oopsie, on the end of the page, I'm just going to cut it off with our scissors and then join it up. Join it up over here. I should have done that before I stuck that piece down. Okay, so all that's left now is our last little bit of finishing touches. And again, I'm going to use these beautiful dome stickers and just add a few bits and pieces. This one, we'll tuck this one under this little bird here. That one there. Okay. One last little leaf. And then again, all I've done is add a little bit of stickles. In this one, I've just added randomly here or there to some of the leaves. You can do that at your leisure. I've just added a few little details just to add a bit of sparkle to the page, which always makes it so pretty. And I've filled some of these flower centers with stickles. So when they dry, it looks like there's a blob of glitter on it. Do one there as well. All right, so you can add the stickles, little touches of glitter, whatever you like on your layout. I've also done a little bit on the inside of my title. And then you can just flatten it a little bit with your finger just to spread it. And that's it. Our second
Really
layout
beautiful.
is done.
Stunning layout, Juliet. Thank you.
Right. You're most welcome. Hope you all enjoyed it. And
Yeah, no,
as
that was
always, there's lots of bits and pieces left. There's extra paper. There's lots of fussy cuts. So let's see you all make some nice cards or tags or whatever extra projects you want to do with your leftovers. There's so much value in the bulk pack. We've done 2 double layouts and there's still plenty more that you can do other projects with.
Oh, awesome. Juliet, thank you. You always put so much effort into your projects and your attention to detail, your coloring of chipboard, your use of the frame, everything. It's just stunning. Thank you for the envelope templates that you sent us as well. Those will be fun in other projects to use.
Yes, definitely.
And, so now the last class we learned tags and now we've done envelopes. So I reckon we're building up a skill set here. So thank you.
I'll come up with something new for the next one.
Awesome. Awesome. Juliet, thank you. We're going to let you go to bed. I think it's almost 10 o'clock our time now.
Yes,
but yeah,
luckily
I
our
think
lights
Juliet,
are still on, so
thank goodness. But I think tomorrow Juliet and I should be around. And so we'll be answering any questions you might have. Just pop them sort of in the chat on the YouTube video. Otherwise, join our WhatsApp groups and you can ask questions there. I'll try to answer them or pose them to Juliet. So thank you for joining us again for this class. Thank you for buying the bulk packs. Thank you for supporting Celebr8. And yeah, we hope to see you next month with the next collection. Tomorrow will be Jenny Heaslip's double interactive layout. So join us for that class as well. Thanks, Juliet.
Super. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, everyone. And
Awesome.
we'll see you next time.
Definitely. Have a good evening.
Take care, you too. Bye for now.